For over 1,000 years, families gathered on this night to remember the moment their ancestors walked free. Lamps flickered in crowded rooms across Jerusalem, shadows moving over tables filled with the same familiar elements: unleavened bread, roasted lamb, shared cups, and ancient blessings repeated without hesitation. It was a night meant for certainty, tradition, and stories told the same way that they were told year after year after year. But in one borrowed room, something felt different. The voices were softer, the glances lasted a little too long. A quiet weight pressed into the edges of the evening as if the room itself understood what the people inside it did not. Everything looked ordinary, everything was not ordinary, because at one table in the middle of the oldest celebration of freedom, a moment was approaching that no one there was prepared to carry, and its cost had already begun to take shape. From the That's Jesus channel, welcome to Coach, where church origins and church history actually coach us how to walk boldly with Jesus today. I'm Bob Balch, and on Mondays we stay between 0 and 500 AD. Today we step into 33 AD as Jesus gathers with his disciples for their last Passover together. The room was borrowed, the meal was traditional, and the moment was anything but ordinary. Jesus had sent 2 of his disciples ahead that morning with specific instructions. They found the upper room exactly as he described, a large space, furnished and ready. By evening, 13 men had gathered there, reclining around low tables in the Passover custom that their ancestors had observed for more than 1,000 years. Jerusalem was crowded. Pilgrims filled in every available space, and the city hummed with preparation. Lambs had been slaughtered at the temple earlier that day, their blood poured out at the altar as the law required, and now those lambs were being roasted in homes and rented rooms across the city. The meal that they were about to share in was the same meal that thousands of Jewish families were sharing that night, a remembrance of liberation, of slavery ended, and of God's faithfulness to his people. But Jesus knew what his disciples did not yet understand, that this particular Passover would be his last. The meal began in the usual way. There were bitter herbs to recall the bitterness of Egypt. There was unleavened bread, baked quickly without yeast, just as their ancestors had eaten it on the night that they fled Pharaoh. And there was wine, as there always was at Passover. And there were the traditional blessings, the words spoken year after year and generation after generation. Jesus reclined at the table with the men he had walked with for 3 years. They had followed him through Galilee and Judea. They had watched him heal the sick and confront the religious authorities. And they had heard him teach in synagogues and on hillsides. They had seen crowds gather and crowds disperse. And those men knew him, or at least they thought that they did. But the tension in the room was real. Jesus had already told them that one of them would betray him. The statement had landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples of confusion and distress through the group. Each man had asked in his own way if he would be the one, and the question hung in the air even as they ate. Judas Iscariot was present. He had already made his arrangements with the chief priests, and the betrayal was set in motion. He knew what he had agreed to do, and Jesus knew it too. Yet there Judas sat, sharing the meal, part of the circle, included in what was about to happen. And at some point during the meal, Jesus took bread. Now this was not unusual. Bread was broken and shared at every Passover. But what he did next was different. He gave thanks. The Greek word used in the earliest accounts is eucharistio, to give thanks, to express gratitude. It's a simple word, common in daily speech, used when someone received a gift or acknowledged a kindness. But in that moment, with betrayal sitting at the table and death waiting just hours away, Jesus gave thanks. He broke the bread and gave it to his disciples. He told them that this bread was his body, given for them. The words were strange, unsettling. Bread was always symbolizing the provision of God, the manna in the wilderness, the sustenance of life itself. And now Jesus was saying that this bread represented him, his own body, soon to be broken. And then he took the cup, and again he gave thanks. The cup that had always been part of the Passover, filled with wine that recalled both joy and suffering, celebration and cost. And Jesus told them that this cup was the new covenant in his blood, poured out for many. The language echoed the old covenant at Sinai when Moses had sprinkled blood on the people and declared them bound to God, but this was something new, a covenant not written in stone, but sealed in blood, his blood. The disciples did not fully understand. How could they? They were fishermen and tax collectors and just ordinary men trying to grasp words that reached beyond their experience. They heard him speak of his body and his blood. They heard him give thanks. But the full weight of what was happening would only become clear later, after everything else had unfolded. Jesus was not inventing a ritual. He was transforming an existing ritual. Passover had always been about deliverance, about a lamb slain so that God's people might live, about blood marking doorposts and death passing over. And now Jesus was placing himself at the center of that story. He was the lamb. His blood would be poured out. His body would be given. The old story was being fulfilled in a new and a final way. And in the middle of it all, Jesus gave thanks. Now, this was not the gratitude of someone who had received good news or experienced unexpected joy. This was gratitude in the face of what was coming: the arrest, the trial, the mockery, the cross. Jesus knew what was coming. He had told his disciples plainly that he would suffer and die. He knew Judas would betray him, that Peter would deny him, that all of them would scatter. He knew the physical pain waiting for him and the spiritual weight that he would carry, and still, Jesus gave thanks. The act of thanksgiving transformed the moment. It declared that even in suffering, even in betrayal, even in death, there's purpose, there was meaning, there was a gift being given, not taken. Jesus was not a victim of circumstances beyond his control. He was offering himself freely, deliberately, and he was doing so with gratitude, thankful that he could give himself. The meal continued. There were more words spoken, more instructions given. Jesus washed their feet earlier that evening, taking the role of a servant, showing them what love looked like in action. And now he was showing them what love looked like in sacrifice. He was giving them something to remember, something to repeat, something that would shape the life of his followers for centuries to come, for millennia to come. When they sang their traditional Passover hymn and left the upper room, the night was not over. Jesus would go to a garden called Gethsemane. He would pray in agony, sweat falling like drops of blood. He would be arrested and dragged before religious and political authorities. He would be condemned. He would be beaten and crucified. All of that was still ahead. But in that room, at that table with these men, Jesus had given thanks. He had taken the bread and the cup, the ordinary elements of an ancient feast, filled them with new meaning, and he had given thanks. He had shown them that gratitude could exist alongside grief, that thanksgiving could be offered even when the cost was unbearable. The disciples would remember that meal. They would repeat it. They would break bread and share the cup in communities scattered across the Roman world. They would do it in remembrance of him, as he had commanded them. And every time they did, they would be reminded that Jesus gave thanks. Not because the moment was easy, but because the gift he was giving was real. The Last Supper was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of something that would outlast that night, and outlast the crucifixion, and outlast even the resurrection. It was the moment when Jesus redefined what it meant to give thanks, to offer gratitude, not for what had been received, but for what was about to be given away. That moment of thanksgiving has echoed through generations, reaching churches that know what it is to carry wounds, that know what it is to have doubts and fractured trust. It invites us to consider what gratitude means when our own communities feel unsettled and fragile, and what happens when we try to give thanks before anything feels resolved. Sometimes saying thank you is hard. Gratitude is never easy for a wounded church. Communities carry stories that don't always resolve cleanly, like strained friendships and fractured trust and memories that we wish had unfolded differently. And when people gather for worship, they bring more than just songs. They bring disappointments and confusion and questions that have no quick answers. Yet the beauty of the church is not found in flawless unity. It's found in imperfect people who choose to come back again and again and again. A table of shared faith has always included complicated hearts, and somehow God keeps meeting His people there. When a congregation whispers, "Thank you," in the middle of tension or uncertainty, that gratitude becomes its own quiet act of courage. It reminds us that we belong to something held together by grace rather than perfection. And maybe when we choose to give thanks as a community, especially when everything feels fragile, when everything feels like it's about to fall apart, when we give thanks as a community, we begin to open space for God to heal what we cannot fix on our own. There are seasons when we face far more than ordinary conflict, though. We see betrayal, we hear slander, we have people making phone calls and sending text messages that stir suspicion and fear and confusion. We hear of dreams or visions or impressions that end up dividing God's people, that end up devouring the witness of those who love the Lord, that end up taking away the word that was sown in new believers, and that even cause children to stumble as they watch their friends and parents being hurt. We see accusations of immorality or witchcraft thrown without evidence. We feel the weight of conversations intended to fracture the church instead of heal the church. And all of it leaves us tired and disoriented and quietly wounded. But none of this is unfamiliar to Jesus. His own circle of 12 was split. One betrayed him, one denied him, others ran. His earthly family lived under lies about supposed sexual sin regarding his mother. He was accused of operating by the power of Beelzebub, that ancient charge of witchcraft. He was plotted against and slandered and watched and spoken of in back rooms long before the cross ever came into view. And every time, it was by people who swore that they were doing so because they loved God. Everything we face, He faced it first, and still, Jesus gave thanks. Ephesians reminds us to not give the devil a foothold, especially when anger or hurt tempt us towards division instead of unity. And Jesus Himself said that if the world persecuted Him, it would also persecute His followers, not as a punishment. It's just a pattern that faithful lives often provoke. So maybe for us, the first step is not chasing every rumor or defending ourselves in every conversation. Maybe for us, it's choosing a shared thank you. Thank you, Lord. Honest, trembling, and real. Thank you. Offered to the God who holds His people together when everything else tries to pull us apart. When we choose gratitude as one body, we make space for healing to begin. Healing in relationships, healing in trust, and healing in the places where division has tried to take root. And as we breathe out that gratitude together, we remember that unity is not something we achieve by effort. It's something that Jesus restores as we turn towards Him with open and unguarded hearts. If this story of thanksgiving and suffering challenged or encouraged you, share it with a friend. They might really need to hear it about now. Make sure you go to thatsjesus.org for other Coach episodes and resources. And don't forget to follow and like and comment and rate and review and subscribe and share and favorite and repost and heart and star and ring the bell and tag a friend. Whisper kind words into your device that's not supposed to be listening, even though it is. In short, Just do whatever you can to trick this algorithm into thinking that you care about this series. But most of all, seriously, don't forget to tune in for more Coach episodes every week. Every episode dives into a different corner of church history, but on Mondays, we stay between 0 and 500 AD. Thanks for listening to Coach, where church origins and church history actually coach us how to walk boldly with Jesus today. I'm Bob Balch with the That's Jesus channel. Have a great day and be blessed. You know, gratitude isn't always natural for me, but episodes like this remind me how much I still need Jesus to steady my heart. Have a great day, folks, and be blessed.